a choice.
This is my path.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the is that? What is that?
Back in 2014, the marketing campaign for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 successfully made it one of my most anticipated movies of all time. The trailers were some of the most fascinating I'd ever seen. To me, they were promising the greatest, most intense Spider-Man story to date. And once the movie then finally came out, I liked it quite a bit.
What? Stupid.
I liked the visuals, I liked the action, the music, I liked most of it. Really, the only thing that the teenage me didn't like was the fact that the final product was a bit of a letdown from the trailers. A lot of that promised stuff had either been misrepresented or just downright not included at all.
Oscorp. Get you under surveillance. What about Peter?
Not everyone has a happy ending.
Oscorp was going to use my research for...
We have plans for you, Peter Parker.
To this day, I'm still obsessing over the question of what is this black thing swinging down the skyscraper. If you know, or if there's someone from Sony here, please let me know. Please. All that being said though, I saw this film again recently and now I'm mostly just confused as to what the I was thinking at the time, because I do now agree with the general consensus that it's a bit of an excruciating mess. But the interesting thing is, the reason why I told you this teenage me backstory is that once I started looking for the main core source behind this movie's biggest issues, it turned out to come down to that same one thing I disliked years ago, the missing trailer stuff. Not the notion that this film has too little, but instead the opposite notion that it has way too much. See, if you break this movie down to its subplots and story elements, you'll find that there's quite a bit of stuff in here. So much in fact that a lot of it had to be cut. But when I say cut, I don't mean cut as in take some of it out completely and focus fully on the rest like is the reasonable thing to do. What I mean is that the studio decided to keep in all this excess of material by just trimming all of it down. And that's the main problem with this movie. That's the very source of the mess that it became. That's what we're setting out to look more into here today. But to avoid excess myself, I'm gonna be highlighting this problem by focusing on the 5 most central main subplots. The conspiracy mystery of Peter's parents, Peter's relationship with Gwen, Peter's life as Spider-Man, the downfall of Harry Osborne, and Max Dillon's path to Electro. Let's take a closer look at these trimmed down subplots and pinpoint the harmful effects of that trimming that they suffer from, in terms of the beginning, the middle, as well as the end, to know what to avoid in the future. Here's what happens when your film just has too much. The excess problem at the beginning is that due to the amount of plot lines you're gonna be starting, there's so little time to spend on each one that they can very easily become way too conveniently random. A great example of this is the character of Max. The way we meet Max is that he's bumbling down the sidewalk with a bunch of blueprints, which by the way we'll never see ever again, and then it just so happens that...
Heads up, watch out! Okay, there you go. You okay? You alright?
Just Spider-Man.
Yeah, Max accidentally gets in the way of a nearby car chase and is consequently saved by Spider-Man, entirely out of random. But to be fair, it is just a one-time introduction thing, so totally acceptable. Well, the next time we see Max, turns out that he isn't just any blueprint guy after all, but instead the leader of the creepy Spider-Man fanboy club.
That's why you're here. You remember my birthday.
Again, seems to come quite out of nowhere, but okay. Well, then it turns out that Max works at Oscorp that plays a big part in the overall story, which has been established solely by the fact that he had an Oscorp badge. Quite convenient once again, but alright. Well, then, before we even get to see Max do anything as an employee of Oscorp, he goes to fix this cable as his first act of work, and then falls into this vat of eels we didn't know existed, which turns him into Electro. What I'm trying to get across is that Max seems less like a real three-dimensional person and more like a personless sum total of all these convenient occurrences that need to occur in order for the plot to function. It's not like any of this stuff is organically built and connected. It's not like Max becomes a Spider-Man fanatic because he gets saved by him. He just happens to be one.
Or, on a closer look, I think Max becoming a fanatic was the intention, but all of that transformation got cut out for time.
It's not like he's involved with the Oscorp plutonium that gets stolen stolen in the beginning to establish that he works at Oscorp. He just happens to work there. It's not like he's working on the eels at Oscorp before they turn him into Electro to justify that it happens, but instead it just is what happens. And that's because there's simply no time for any of that extra stuff, because the opening 7 minutes, for example, was spent entirely on Peter's parents' conspiracy subplot that has nothing to do with Max. I mean, even with this heavily trimmed down version, it still takes an hour for us to get to the first Electro showdown. Thing is, it just comes with the cost that now there's no real sense as to what Max is doing, or why he suddenly starts hearing voices in his head, or why he suddenly goes from the biggest Spider-Man fan to the biggest Spider-Man hater. The cost that our main villain now comes off as just a dumb, nonsensical caricature. But hey, at least we're here, right? We have this cool music and action. It's still pretty good, right?
Wrong.
Joking aside, if your villain's main want is to be noticed by others, then maybe early on you should show scenes of him actually trying to get people to notice and like him, instead of just a couple quick moments of him being avoidant and resentful of everyone around him.
Excuse me. There's more room on the sideline, folks.
Log jam. Come on. Everybody else is leaving. Why do I have to stay?
I'm having a birthday party. We'd love to invite you. It's just the guest list is closed.
Oh, got it. Well, thank you anyway.
And with most of the plotlines in here, same thing. One moment Peter and Gwen are all great. Next moment he's breaking up with her because he keeps seeing her dead dad. Despite the fact that this apparently isn't a new thing and doesn't explain why he breaks up with her right now, and overall makes the whole thing feel forced and contrived. Or just look at the Harry subplot. We have no established knowledge of Harry until he suddenly just appears. Okay, fair enough. Then turns out that it's because his dad is dying. Alright, guess that explains why he came. Then turns out that his dad has this weird disease. Well, I guess it has to be something. Well, then turns out that this disease is genetic and that Harry is right now also starting to show symptoms of it and will die at any moment unless he gets some special spider blood. You know, despite the fact that his dad is dying as an old man and that we've never even heard of any of this stuff or them before. If this is what you want to do, then maybe instead of opening your movie with Peter's parents, open your movie with young Peter reeling from his parents' death and have young Harry and his dad visit him. Show Harry consoling Peter to establish that they are childhood friends. Show Harry's dad show small symptoms of the disease to establish it exists. Show stuff in a way that it doesn't all just oddly appear. Altogether, find the time to organically build up these characters and subplots you're planning to begin, because otherwise it most likely is just gonna be too nonsensically random. Speaking of which, by the way, I gotta tell you this thing that happened to me yesterday. So I was fixing my ceiling when suddenly my dog brought over my phone because it was ringing. And it was Bob Iger, the chairman of Disney. And I know this might seem a bit off because how would Bob Iger have my number and how can I have a dog when it has never been established to exist, but just trust me. Well, Bob Iger was just calling to make fun of me for the fact that I couldn't watch the new Mandalorian season because it's not on the Krakosian Disney+. And when I checked, yeah, there was no new Mandalorian season. All kinds of stuff, but not that. And I was sad at first because Bob Iger was laughing at me. But then I remembered my magic blue button. I pressed my magic blue button and suddenly my Krakosian Disney Plus was American Disney Plus, and there was the new Mandalorian season. And you know what that magic blue button was? Yeah, it was Surfshark, the almighty VPN that actually has been established to make stuff like this possible. They offer to sponsor this video with a special 83% off discount that also gives you 3 extra months for free by using code FILM. So if you want to protect your personal data from being stolen by hackers like Disney chairman Bob Iger, or if you want to see all the content that every streaming service always divides behind some level of geolocks, check out the link in the description and get Surfshark's magic blue bun for yourself. You'll be helping out the channel as well. But anyway, pretty great story, huh? At least Amazing Spider-Man 2 thinks so. The middle section of this excess problem is that since you have all these different subplots and characters, many of which have now been built on such flimsy foundations, it's very difficult for them to actually have real substance in terms of goals and stakes and urgency and so on and so on. For example, look at the conspiracy plotline that begins the movie. Peter's dad destroys his work at Oscorp and steals some data, after which he leaves Peter with Aunt May and Uncle Ben and runs off with his wife to leave their old life behind, which doesn't go so well. honestly, the kickoff to this parent subplot is actually pretty great and intriguing. But then all of a sudden, because we have all this other stuff that has nothing to do with it, it kinda gets tossed aside altogether. Peter has no goals or motivations or anything relating to his parents. His parents have no effect on anything he does, which for the next half of the film reduces the subplot to a couple offhanded glimpses and mentions.
What do you think? One guy or many?
I'll love you long after you're gone.
It's not until 80 minutes in that the opening finally comes back in play when Peter confronts his aunt to learn a terrible truth about his parents.
After the funeral, 2 government men came to see us. The genetics research that your father was doing with Norman Osborne was very valuable, and that people would pay a lot for it. And that's why he ran off with it. They said he was a traitor.
And so now, Peter finally has a clearer goal of finding out the real truth about his parents. Great! It's just that at this point, there's a bit of a problem. The problem of, so what? The notion of Peter's parents being criminals has played no part in his life in this movie whatsoever. This is the first time he even hears about it. And so what? When Peter goes and finds his dad's secret subway train to learn that his parents were actually the good guys, it changes nothing. It's not like Peter's parents being thought of as criminals has made his life difficult. It's not like other people ever bring it up to use against him. It's not like it's an obstacle that he needs to overcome by vindicating his parents. It's not like there's any kind of stakes or urgency or purpose or anything tied to it, considering that so far Peter's been able to just lock it away in a closet, meaning that the bulk of this entire parent subplot just seems kinda pointless. Same with the other stuff. We have the plotline of Peter and Gwen breaking up to create conflict and sexual tension between them.
I break up with you. I break up with you.
Which ultimately serves no purpose. The second time they meet, they suddenly break up. Third time they meet, they're already all over each other again. It's difficult to find any real conflict or tension between them when they're fondling and kissing each other every chance they get.
You just kissed me.
How'd you like it?
I felt a little bit rushed.
Like, if they both so clearly want to be with each other without there being any obstacles blocking that, then why aren't they just with each other? Why have them break up at all if it serves no point? It's not like Peter has a strong urgent goal of getting Gwen back before she leaves to study in England. He pretty much already has her back, and now they're just standing around waiting for the results to see if she gets to England. Or look at the Harry plotline again. Harry gets in conflict with Peter because he needs that special spider blood to save his life, and Peter isn't so sure about giving it, which could have been very powerful if it was built to be personally tied to Peter, like the trailers made it seem.
You're gonna want to see this. Oscorp. Get you under surveillance. Why? Isn't that the question of the day?
But here, because they needed to trim this down to fit in all this other stuff, the whole thing becomes so incredibly shallow that it gets to the point of being downright ridiculous.
Tell me where he is, and I will go ask him myself. What? You took his picture, so you know him.
If you're gonna do something, then do it. Don't bother going only part of the way, because that usually results in lacking goals and motivations, which in turn makes what you're doing shallow and without a point. Things might be happening in your movie, but nothing really happens. Finally, the excess problem at the end can then very easily lead to a lacking resolution that ultimately leaves the audience with an unfulfilled, frustrated feeling about the whole experience. Looking at the Max plotline again, on the surface we do get this massive finale battle that serves as an ultimate sum total payoff to all the different things we've done before. We have this huge visually striking clash at this power grid site that has been established to be Max's creation, which gives him home field advantage. We have Spider-Man using his new electricity-resistant gear that he built throughout the story to give himself a fighting chance. We have Gwen being a crucial part of the plan of defeating Max because she has worked on this place as an Oscorp employee. We have all this stuff coming together to make this finale battle feel big. Except, of course, it doesn't, because none of that stuff I just mentioned is real. Max has never actually been to this place before to set up that it exists and show how it works. It's just something that's been briefly mentioned.
I submitted a lot of designs for the power grid, and they used a lot of them, and I noticed that, and those power grids were designed by me.
You designed them? Sure you did.
Peter never actually figured out how to make his gear electricity resistant because his time was instead spent looking for his dad's subway train. It's just something that Gwen threw together in 2 seconds in the scene before this.
Okay, good. Try. Hurry. Okay, works, good.
And that is why you were number 2 at Midtown.
And Gwen herself has never actually had any established ties to this place whatsoever to justify having crucial knowledge of it. It's just something that she now says.
I'm coming with you. I've seen the grid specs and I know how to reset the entire system.
Sure you did.
I know how to help you.
What are you doing?
I know the grid specs. I can reset the system. I know the grid specs. I can reset the system.
And when you put all that together, fighting in a place that hasn't ever been established, with gear that wasn't ever really built, according to knowledge that was never learned, it yanks away all the power from this sequence. Because when this entire massive finale battle is built on only the one small setup of blowing Electro up like a battery, the whole thing just ends up feeling tiny. Which is why the filmmakers then also tossed in this random plane moment in a desperate Hail Mary effort to make us at least feel something. And the sad thing is that in here, that's actually pretty good, considering that in most other cases, there is no resolution at all. That subplot of Peter looking for the truth about his parents to vindicate them, yeah, it never comes back at the end in any way. The subplot of Harry falling out with Peter and Spider-Man purely for the fact that they don't give him that special spider blood that he's gonna die without at any moment, just like his dad. Yeah, no.
Speaking of progress, you're looking better.
I'm already dying. This will save my life.
And you betrayed me!
It comes and goes.
Pretty much the only good resolution comes in the subplot of Peter and Gwen. Well, not good as in positive, but good as in it carries a clear effective impact. See, after Gwen has died, her death is what pushes Peter to make a highly emotional choice of leaving his life as Spider-Man behind. Resolution, consequence, just how it should be. For example, remember how at the beginning I mentioned the plotline of Peter's life as Spider-Man and then just left it out altogether? Yeah, well, this is the plotline we ultimately end on, meaning that we now need to find a way for Peter to choose to become Spider-Man once more, a way that leaves the audience off with an emotionally fulfilled feeling. And how could we do this? Well, maybe by concluding one of the other remaining plotlines. Maybe Peter's dad shows up alive sometime after Gwen's death to give a final piece of fatherly advice to Peter, thus resolving the parent subplot in a way that causes Peter to make a choice that carries emotional weight. That's one possibility.
If you lose hope, then the Osborns of the world really have won. Your mother died for nothing. Gwen died for nothing. I can't come to terms with a world like that. And with great power comes great responsibility.
But of course, that or anything like it never happens because all that stuff had to be trimmed out in order to fit parts of everything in this movie. And so Peter ultimately chooses to become Spider-Man once more at this very moment just because that's what he does, effectively stripping away all possible emotion from that choice. And then we're facing the evil Russian guy from the beginning again, and you remember that, oh yeah, that Oscorp plutonium that the Russian guy was stealing in the beginning never led to anything either. And that's about where you then have it. The final metaphorical hammer to the nail of realization that you just wasted 2.5 hours.